Tom Weaver's life in Maplewood had grown eerily silent in the year since his pitbull Rocky vanished on a stormy night. Nearly a year had passed, but Rocky's absence felt as fresh and painful as ever, casting a quiet over Tom's home that he couldn't escape. Rocky had been Tom's steadfast companion through everything, especially after the tragic passing of his wife 3 years prior. In losing Rocky, it felt to Tom like he had lost the final connection to his past life, a life once filled with love and companionship. Each day, Tom returned to his empty home, where everything seemed to remind him of Rocky. The toys he used to play with lay untouched in a corner, his worn leash hung by the door, and his favorite blanket, slightly frayed, rested near the couch where they used to sit together. These things, once so simple, now felt like reminders of a time when the house was filled with warmth and life. Even though months had gone by, Tom couldn't bring himself to put these items away, holding on to the hope that one day Rocky might come bounding back through the door as if no time had passed. As the weeks turned into months, friends gently suggested that he try to move on. "Maybe you could get another dog," they would say, well-meaning but unaware of how deep his bond with Rocky truly was. To Tom, letting go of Rocky felt like abandoning a part of his own soul. Each day he clung to a glimmer of hope, convinced that somewhere out there, Rocky was waiting to be found. Every weekend, he drove to different shelters, sometimes driving hours away from Maplewood. He had become known among animal control officers, neighbors, and townsfolk alike, his dedication admired by those who understood his journey. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves turned shades of gold and crimson, Tom felt an urge to visit Lakeside Animal Shelter, a small facility on the town's edge. The shelter was bustling with the sounds of barking dogs and the hum of activity as volunteers tended to their charges. Tom walked past rows of kennels, his heart heavy yet hopeful, his eyes scanning each enclosure for the familiar sight of Rocky's black and white coat. A shelter volunteer noticed Tom's weary expression and approached with a gentle smile. "Looking for someone special?" she asked. Tom nodded, describing Rocky in heartfelt detail. The volunteer listened, compassion shining in her eyes, and guided him toward the back of the shelter. "Let's check Kennel 7. A new Pitbull arrived recently. He's a bit reserved, but maybe he'll recognize you." Slowly he approached, his body tense but his eyes filled with curiosity. Tom stretched his fingers through the bars, his heart brimming with emotions he could barely contain. As his hand met the dog's hesitant nose, Tom felt a spark of recognition between them. In that brief moment, the bond they shared surfaced once again, stronger than the time and distance that had kept them apart. The shelter volunteer, standing by, was visibly moved, her eyes bright with emotion at the silent reunion unfolding before her. Leaving the shelter with Rocky by his side, Tom felt as if a part of himself, lost and wandering, had finally found its way back. Both he and Rocky had been changed by their experiences, but their bond had endured. The ride home was quiet, with Tom occasionally glancing over to see Rocky curled up in the passenger seat, his eyes half closed but alert, as though still trying to process his surroundings. When they arrived home, Tom opened the door and let Rocky step in first. The dog paused, sniffing the air, his ears twitching as he took in the familiar sense of his old life. Cautiously, he moved from room to room, his paws padding on the wooden floors, his tail low but beginning to wag as he recognized each memory-laden corner of the house. When Rocky reached the living room, he paused by the pile of his toys, picking up a worn tennis ball. His tail wagged a bit more, as if realizing he was truly home. In the following days, Tom and Rocky settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Each morning, they ventured out for walks around Maplewood, reacquainting Rocky with the familiar sights and sounds of the town. But it was evident that Rocky had changed. He startled easily, flinching at sudden noises, and sometimes drifted into long, quiet stares, as though remembering distant places and experiences. The haunted look in his eyes tugged at Tom's heart, reminding him of the silent battles Rocky must have endured during their time apart. Yet Tom's patience and understanding slowly helped Rocky heal. He kept their interactions gentle, structuring each day with calm and consistency. Gradually, Rocky began to respond, his trust rebuilding with each passing day. His tail lifted higher, and his steps grew more assured. At night, Rocky would curl up by Tom's feet, his breathing steady, his body finally at peace. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the town, Rocky leaned his head against Tom's leg, a quiet gesture that spoke volumes. Tom ran his hand gently over Rocky's head, his heart swelling with gratitude for each precious moment they shared. He realized then that Rocky wasn't just a dog, he was a piece of himself, a companion who had returned when he needed it most. As autumn turned into winter, their bond deepened. The days grew colder and shorter, but neither Tom nor Rocky seemed to mind. The small house that had once felt empty now pulsed with warmth and life. Rocky, once thin and weary, had regained a healthy weight, his coat regaining the luster it once had. The haunted look in his eyes had faded, replaced by a warmth that Tom remembered well. One snowy morning, Tom received a phone call from the shelter that had reunited him with Rocky. They invited him to share their story at a community adoption event, hoping it might inspire others to open their homes to animals in need. Tom hesitated at first, unsure if he was ready to relive the painful memories of the past year. But one look at Rocky, now resting peacefully by his feet, filled him with resolve. Their journey, though painful, was one of hope and resilience. On the day of the event, Tom and Rocky were greeted warmly by volunteers and community members, eager to hear their story. As Tom spoke, he felt the weight of their journey lift, transforming from a story of loss into one of perseverance and healing. He recounted the night Rocky had disappeared, the countless hours he had spent searching, and the joyful moment of reunion. Rocky stayed close to his side, his gaze fixed on Tom, as if understanding that they were sharing something profoundly important. The event was a resounding success, and a handful of the shelter's animals found new homes that day. People approached Tom afterward, expressing how his dedication and love for Rocky had inspired them. Children gathered around Rocky, who, now comfortable around strangers again, allowed gentle pats and scratches behind his ears. For Tom, seeing Rocky's newfound calmness and trust felt like a victory, a testament to the journey they had undertaken together. As they walked home that evening, the snow fell gently, blanketing Maplewood in a peaceful silence. Each step they took reminded Tom of the trials they had faced, but now, with Rocky walking confidently by his side, it all felt like a distant memory. Rocky no longer flinched at the sounds of passing cars or sudden movements. He seemed lighter, as if finally understanding that he was home for good. That night, as they settled in by the fire, Tom looked over at Rocky, who was curled up comfortably, his eyes half closed. A deep sense of peace filled Tom's heart. The year apart had been painful, but it had brought them both to a place of healing and renewal. In that quiet moment, Tom realized that no matter what challenges the future held, he and Rocky would face them together, side by side.